Cool. Well, Simon has nicely described the process of laryngoscopy in that previous section, and with an appropriate focus, I think, on Operator 1. However, he did mention several times this mysterious Operator 2, and at several points throughout this course, we have discussed the importance of intubation being a team game. So right now, I want to rewind back to the beginning of intubation and look at the vital input that Operator 2 brings to make this a successful intubation. And I thought it might be useful to do that by reviewing each step of the intubation process. And for each of these steps, we'll not only analyse the involvement of Operator 2, but we'll use that analysis to assess the skill set required of the person taking up the role. Because I hope you'll come to realise that for Operator 2 to have the maximum impact on intubation's safety and success, they really need a significant level of technical skill and applied knowledge. So let's start out with the kit dump, because Operator 1 is likely to be tied up with ongoing airway management and pre-oxygenation strategies, and that means that Operator 2 is often tasked with setting out the kit dump. And as we heard in my session earlier on, the location and the orientation of the site for intubation needs to be really carefully thought out. And Operator 2 needs to understand that and appreciate all those factors and then adapt them to the situation that they find themselves in. And when it comes to laying out the kit, Operator 2 needs to have an intimate knowledge of all of the equipment so it can be checked, put together and laid out in the correct order. Now, once the kit dump is complete, if this is an RSI, then Operator 2 might also be tasked with drawing up the medicines. So not only do they need to be familiar with the concentrations and the presentations of the medicines required, but for an optimally safe induction of anaesthesia, Operator 2 may be involved in the dosage decisions. And if they are, then that means they also need an in-depth knowledge of pharmacology and critical care medicine. Okay, so now we're on to preparation of the patient, and in particular I think positioning is worth looking at, because while Operator 1 should definitely determine the height of the stretcher for intubation, from their position above the patient it is really difficult to determine whether the ear canal is level with the sternal notch. However, Operator 2, who's standing on the side of the patient, is perfectly placed to assess the efficacy of any ramping or head positioning. There is a reason that we took these pictures from the side. So Operator 2 should absolutely lead on that aspect of patient preparation. Now, the final step of preparation is getting the team ready and drawing everything together with a checklist. And this has got to be undertaken just prior to induction of anaesthesia, once everything is laid out and ready. It is called a checklist, after all, and not a do list. So I don't really think it matters who reads out the checklist. In reality, it's probably going to be Operator 2, because as we've said, Operator 1 might have their hands full with airway management. But I say it doesn't matter, because this should be a challenge and response checklist with both operators involved. And the checklist should be read out verbatim with no deviances, because each item should be a positive statement to which the answer is check or present. For example, patient positioning optimized, check. Laryngoscope present, check. There shouldn't be any discussions at this point. The checklist is there as a safety net to ensure that everything is present and correct. And any discrepancies or items that have been forgotten should result in the checklist being stopped or paused whilst that anomaly is corrected. And I think Airway 2 can play a very important role in keeping that checklist procedure on track. Okay, so on to the intubation. Now, you've seen this video before, but let's look at it now from the Operator 2 perspective. And in this case, Simon is performing that role. He's standing on the right-hand side of the patient along with the kit dump. Now, hopefully I've chosen the right person for the job, because to do this well, he needs to understand the airway anatomy and the process of intubation so he can provide essential input to my efforts. He's going to be observing, anticipating, planning, prompting and guiding. And on top of all of that, he's going to be maintaining a wider awareness of the situation, while I am very much task focused with the technical skill involved in the intubation. So, currently we are pre-oxygenating the patient. We've got a 2-person mask technique with Simon ventilating via the resuscitation bag. So Simon has now disconnected the bag, which remains attached to the end-tidal CO2, the HME and the catheter mount, and he takes that as a whole and lies it on the patient's chest. That's important because that means we've got rapid access to it after the, hopefully, successful intubation. Okay, look at Simon's eye line. He is watching my technique like a hawk. Now, that is not because I'm a rubbish intubator. Well, I mean, maybe it is, but nevertheless, given his position relative to the patient, he is really well placed to comment on several aspects of the intubation, such as how deep the blade has gone in. That means he can be anticipating any issues that I might encounter and then suggesting solutions to overcome them. But as well as watching, he's listening too. He's expecting me to talk through what I'm seeing. So if I go quiet, he knows that I'm probably getting stressed and I'm struggling with the view, and that is a prompt for him to remind me to start talking again and talk through the problems so he can offer his wisdom. Now, clearly this is where the benefit of video laryngoscopy really lies, because as well as having the problems described and watching my technique, he's also able to watch the screen and see the airway for himself. That means he can be getting ready to offer ELM or head lift or suction or whatever is required to achieve a successful laryngoscopy, and I've not even asked for it yet. Right, so at this point, Simon knows that I need to keep my eyes on the glottis and not look away. So he slid the bougie really beautifully right into my line of sight, close to the patient's face, so it remains in focus for me, and that means I've got no issues taking a hold of it and using it. Cool, now you can see Simon just gently supporting the end of the bougie. He's not manipulating it, he's not moving it, but he's just supporting it. And that prevents it from whipping around and taking my eye out if I get a bit carried away. But it also means that he is ready to slide the tube over when I give him the nod. Great, so the bougie is through the cords and I've clearly verbalised that to Simon. Now again, if this was a video laryngoscope, he could have been watching as well and confirmed that the tube had gone through the cords. And after I gave him the go-ahead, Simon has slid the tube over the bougie and he's starting to thread it down towards the mouth. Now it's just worth saying at this point here, sometimes the bougie gets held up on the plastic connector at the end of the tracheal tube. And just to sort that out, you can just apply a little bit of pressure to straighten out the bougie within the tube, and often that allows the tube just to continue sliding down. So this is a really critical moment. There's been some very clear communication between the two of us that I have now got hold of the ET tube and Simon is holding the bougie. And so Simon holds the bougie still while I slide the tube down over it. And with his other hand, notice that Simon's now gone down to the corner of the patient's mouth and he's pulling it gently down towards the bed. Now, that's really nice little move. That just opens up the right-hand side of the mouth and allows me to advance the tube really nice and smooth. And you can also apply that technique before bougie insertion. That just helps to reduce the oral angle by just a few more degrees and improves your chance of first-pass success. Alrighty, so we're getting there now. The bougie has been removed. Simon inflates the cuff with around 6 to 7 mils of air, and then he's going to check the pilot balloon to ensure that it remains filled. If it's not and it's deflated, that might indicate a cuff rupture, which is a bit of a pain, and that means we need to reinsert a new tube. And there we go. Simon has now reattached the resuscitation bag with the end-tidal, HME and catheter mount still attached. He's going to look for capnographic confirmation of tube placement whilst I observe the chest and look for chest rise. And once that's all done, we're going to secure the tube, note the length and move on to deliver our post-intubation plan.
Oh, and there we are, the old dream team back at it again, leaving me back at the ranch, I imagine. Anyway, so in all fairness, that is absolutely great. Cheers, James. And, I don't have many questions, to be honest, but I was debating with myself whilst you were talking in my head, and I was thinking, who's more important here? Is it operator 1 or is it operator 2? Where do you have your most skilled operator in these cases? Got any answers for me?
Jeepers, that is tough and a really, really fascinating question, actually. And a pretty hard one to answer. But okay, let's try. I think ultimately both roles are clearly required and both of them require very finessed skills. But I think if we extrapolate the arguments that I put forward for the skills and the input of operator 2 to their absolute extreme, then I think you could argue that Operator 2 is the most vital role because, yes, Operator 1 is undertaking the laryngoscopy and passing the tube into the trachea, but their actions can be heavily influenced and guided by Operator 2. So we could say Operator 1 is the puppet who gets all of the laughs and the applause, but the unseen Operator 2 is the one pulling the strings. They're there enforcing the drills. They're providing the ELM. They're coaching your technique when you get it wrong. I don't think we can underestimate the importance of that Operator 2 role. So, even if your current role doesn't allow you to intubate, I think you can have a huge impact on the success of the intubation as Operator 2.